The classroom was a box, a beige box, a very, very beige box. The walls were beige, the ceiling was beige, even the floor tiles, a sort of dreary, speckled beige, seemed to sigh with boredom. A large clock on the wall ticked, loudly. Each tick was a small hammer, chipping away at the long, slow afternoon. Charts showing the life cycle of a bean, or the multiplication tables up to 12, but no further, oh no, drooped sadly from the walls. They were probably tired of being beige, too. It was a room designed, Lily often thought, to make interesting things go to sleep, and stay asleep, forever. Lily was a small sort of girl, the sort you might not notice, even if you were looking quite hard. She often sat near the back, tucked away, like a forgotten button in a dusty box. Today she was next to the class pot plant. It was a fern, a rather unhappy fern. Its leaves were turning a bit yellow, and a bit brown. Lily felt a bit sorry for it. It probably longed for a rainforest, or at least a window that wasn't quite so grimy. Lily, you see, was a champion daydreamer. Her mind was a marvelous place, full of colors that were definitely not beige. While Miss Weaver talked, Lily traveled. She flew on dragons with scales like emeralds, over mountains made of raspberry jam. She had tea parties with chatty squirrels, squirrels who wore tiny hats and planned daring raids on the local bird feeder. Sometimes she explored underwater kingdoms, where mermaids with rainbow tails complained. They complained about how difficult it was to find a good waterproof biscuit. Anything, absolutely anything, was more exciting than the history of the common housefly, which was, unfortunately, today's thrilling topic. It made Button seem quite racy. Miss Weaver's voice was a low hum, like a distant lawnmower, on a very hot day when you'd rather be having ice cream. The other children in the beige box wriggled, or poked each other with pencils, or drew pictures of angry robots in their notebooks. Lily was an expert at looking attentive. Her eyes would be fixed on Miss Weaver, her expression thoughtful, but inside her head? Inside, she was captain of a pirate ship, sailing the stormy seas of her inkwell, in search of lost treasure, and a lifetime supply of fizzy lemonade. Suddenly, in the middle of a sentence about fly antennae, which, according to Miss Weaver, were terribly fascinating, Lily saw it. Not with her pirate captain eyes, but with her real, Lily in the beige classroom eyes. There was a flicker of movement, on the windowsill, just by the unhappy fern. Plip! Then a soft plop, a tiny bright green something. Had a leaf fallen from the fern? No, this was too bright, too alive. Lily blinked. Once, twice, her pirate ship wobbled, then vanished completely. Replaced by a question mark, a very large, very green question mark. It was a frog, a very small frog, no bigger than Lily's thumb. Its skin was a brilliant, shiny green, like a freshly painted leaf. But that was not the most astonishing thing. Oh no! The most astonishing thing, the thing that made Lily's breath catch in her throat, was that the frog was wearing glasses. Tiny, perfectly round, wire-rimmed spectacles, perched neatly on its little froggy nose. They glinted, even in the dull light of the beige classroom. The frog looked terribly serious, and rather scholarly, for a frog, in a classroom, during a lecture on flies. Lily's jaw, which had been set in a look of polite interest for Miss Weaver, almost unhinged itself. She managed to keep it attached to her face, but it was a close thing. This was not a daydream. Daydreams, even her best ones, didn't usually involve such well-dressed amphibians. This was real, a real frog, with real glasses. Her mind, which moments before had been sailing the seven seas, was now entirely focused on that small, green, bespectacled creature. It was, without a doubt, the most interesting thing to have ever happened. In room 4B, possibly in the history of the school, the frog sat quite still for a moment. Its tiny throat pulsed. In, out, in, out. It seemed to be taking in its surroundings, the dusty windowsill, the unhappy fern, the rows of children, the droning Miss Weaver, its head tilted just a fraction, as if it were listening intently. Or perhaps, Lily thought, it was judging the quality of the lecture on flies, and finding it, like Lily, rather wanting. Then, its gaze, magnified slightly by the tiny lenses, seemed to settle right on Lily. Or was it just looking past her at the drooping bean chart? It was hard to say, but Lily felt a prickle of something. Miss Weaver, meanwhile, was in full flight. Metaphorically speaking, of course, unlike the flies she was discussing. And the compound eyes of the common housefly, she declared, her voice resonating with a strange passion for insect anatomy, are a miracle of natural engineering. She tapped the blackboard with her pointer. Tap, tap, tap. She never seemed to notice the small, extraordinary things, like a child about to burst with a secret, or a pigeon that had once tried to enroll in her mathematics class. Her focus was usually on the blackboard, or the front row, or her own very important thoughts about flies. There was the famous incident of the escaped hamster. Herbert the hamster from the classroom next door had made a daring bid for freedom. He'd scurried into room 4B. He'd done a little dance by Miss Weaver's feet. Miss Weaver had peered down, adjusted her own much larger glasses, and said, "Ah, a new dust bunny, must tell the cleaner." Herbert, deeply offended, had scurried back out again. No, Miss Weaver was not known for her keen powers of observation when it came to things smaller than a textbook, or less noisy than a fire alarm. This frog, Lily suspected, was quite safe from her detection. Lily tried a small cough. A delicate, "Ahem, look over here, there's something amazing" sort of cough. Miss Weaver paused. "Gesundheit, dear," she said without turning around. Now where were we? Ah, yes, the proboscis. Lily then tried staring, intensely, at the windowsill, hoping to direct Miss Weaver's gaze through sheer willpower. Miss Weaver, feeling the stare perhaps, adjusted her cardigan. "Is there a draft, children?" she asked the ceiling. "Some of you look a little flushed." Lily sighed. A very quiet internal sigh. It was no good. The frog was her secret. For now. The beautiful, absurd contrast was almost too much. Here was this tiny, magical creature, a visitor from goodness knows where, poised on the edge of their dull, beige world. And there was Miss Weaver, now explaining with great enthusiasm how a fly tastes with its feet. The frog blinked its bespectacled eyes, slowly, thoughtfully, as if considering the implications of tasting with one's feet, from a uniquely amphibious point of view. Lily found herself smiling. A real, genuine smile. Not a daydream smile. This was much, much better. This was a frog with glasses smile. Section 4. The Spectacled Frog's Secret Mission. Then, the frog moved. It was not a hop. Frogs, Lily knew from books, hopped. This frog, however, seemed to consider hopping a bit undignified. It performed a sort of slow, careful waddle across the dusty terrain of the windowsill. Its tiny, webbed feet made no sound. It moved with a surprising sense of purpose, past the unhappy fern towards a pile of old, forgotten books. Books that looked as if they hadn't been opened since the school was built. Books that probably held secrets and ancient spells. Or perhaps just very out-of-date information about geography. It stopped beside a particularly thick, particularly dusty volume. The cover was a faded, murky green. The title, just barely visible in letters of tarnished gold, read, "Advanced Pond Management and Other Aquatic Enigmas." The frog reached out a delicate webbed hand and tapped the cover. Once, twice, a firm, decisive tap, as if to say, this is the one, pay attention. Lily's heart did a little flip. What did it mean? Was the frog a librarian, a researcher from a very specialized university? Or maybe a spy sent from a rival pond with a crucial message? Lily's mind, never one to shy away from an intriguing possibility, began to whir. Perhaps the frog was a professor. Professor Phileas Frog, here to deliver a guest lecture on the advanced principles of lily pad architecture. Or maybe it was a detective, Inspector Croker, investigating the mysterious disappearance of the school pond's prize-winning tadpole. The scenarios tumbled through her head, each one more delightful than the last, and all of them infinitely more captivating than Miss Weaver's current monologue, which had, Lily vaguely registered, moved on to the aerodynamics of a gnat's wing, Gnats, apparently, were also marvels. The frog turned its head. Its bespectacled eyes met Lily's for a proper, undeniable moment. There was an intelligence in that gaze, a clear, calm knowing. It then looked back at the dusty book, then pointedly back at Lily. The message, unspoken as it was, seemed perfectly clear, or as clear as a silent, spectacle-wearing amphibian could make it. Lily felt a strange little zing, a connection, as if she, Lily the unnoticed, Lily the daydreamer, had just been given a very important, very secret assignment. This was no ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Not anymore. Section 5. An amphibious interruption and a shared secret. Just as Lily was wondering what her assignment might entail, the frog did something even more extraordinary. It cleared its throat. Now, you might think a frog clearing its throat would sound like a croak, or a ribbit, or perhaps a gurgle. But this frog, being no ordinary frog, produced a sound that was remarkably like a tiny, polite human ahem, or perhaps it was ribbit hem. It was very soft, very discreet. But in the relative quiet of the classroom, Miss Weaver was momentarily searching for her chalk. It was audible. Lily's eyes widened. This frog had manners. Excellent manners. Miss Weaver, having located a stub of yellow chalk, turned back to the blackboard. Now, the flight patterns of the midge, she announced, are a fascinating study in miniature chaos theory. She paused, her head tilted. Did someone hum? She asked the air vaguely. A rather frog-like hum? For a breathless moment, Lily thought she'd been discovered, that the frog's polite throat clearing had given the game away. But no. Miss Weaver merely frowned at a dusty corner, shook her head, and began to draw a complicated diagram of midge flight. The frog, wisely, remained perfectly still and silent. Then, with a small, neat hop, it seemed some hopping was acceptable after all, the frog landed directly on the cover of Advanced Pond Management. It puffed out its little chest, opened its tiny mouth, and out popped, not a fly nor a croak, but a minuscule scroll of paper, rolled up tightly, tied with a thread that looked suspiciously like a strand of spider silk. It landed with a soft, papery whisper, right on the dusty book. A message, a secret message, delivered by a bespectacled frog. Lily felt as if her brain might actually fizz with excitement. This was beyond even her wildest jam mountain-conquering daydreams. This was Lily's chance. Miss Weaver was fully engrossed in her midge diagram. Her back was turned to the class. The chalk squeaked. The other children were either dozing or dutifully copying the squiggles. No one was looking. No one except the frog, who was looking directly at Lily, with an expression that clearly said, "Well, what are you waiting for? An engraved invitation?" Lily knew with a sudden, sharp certainty that tingled down to her toes that the message was for her, for Lily, the quiet girl, the one who usually lived in stories. Now a story had come to find her. Section 6. The Vanishing Act and a Lingering Question. Lily moved. It was the bravest thing she had ever done, without a pirate ship or a dragon to help her. She pretended her pencil had slipped off the desk onto the beige, speckled floor. "Oops," she whispered, far too quietly for Miss Weaver to hear. She bent down as if searching for the lost pencil. Then, like a little mouse, she began to crawl, silently, carefully, towards the windowsill. Her heart was beating like a hummingbird's wings, thump, thump, thump against her ribs. Each thump seemed to echo in the quiet, fly-obsessed classroom. She hoped no one else could hear it. Her fingers, slightly dusty from the floor, brushed against the windowsill, and there it was, the tiny scroll. It felt surprisingly important, like a message from a king or a wizard. The frog watched her. Its glasses seemed to magnify its steady gaze. It gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod, or perhaps it was just blinking again. It was terribly difficult to read the facial expressions of a frog, especially one wearing corrective eyewear, but Lily felt a sense of approval, of a mission understood. She carefully, gently picked up the scroll. It was surprisingly light, like a dried leaf. Just as her fingers closed around the precious message, the frog did its final, most astonishing trick. It leaped. Not onto the floor, not back out the window, but straight up, into the air. For a single shimmering moment it hung there. It seemed to glow with a soft greenish light, like a tiny amphibious firefly. Then it simply vanished. Poof. Gone. As if it had been a figment of the afternoon light, or a particularly vivid daydream after all. All that remained was the faintest, almost imaginary scent of pond water, and a lingering sense of wonder, and the dusty book. Lily crawled back to her desk, the tiny scroll clutched tightly, safely in her hand. She slipped it into her pocket. Miss Weaver was now erasing the midge diagram. "And that, children," she said, with a sigh of satisfaction, "is the basic principle of midge flight." Any questions? No one had any questions. Of course not. The classroom settled back into its usual beige stillness. Nothing had changed. The clock still ticked. The fern still drooped. And yet, for Lily, everything had changed. Was the frog real? Or had her imagination finally outdone itself? The scroll, warm against her palm, felt very real indeed. It held an answer. Or perhaps just the beginning of a brand new, wonderfully unbeige adventure.